One thing America can make, it's a bomb. Ask the Japanese. Ask the Germans. I've never heard of an American bomb not working. Have you? Everybody says direct hit, years to come back from it. And then there's CNN alone in the corner in last place, spewing enemy propaganda. I don't think they can come back from this.
Entertainment host Fox News' Jesse Waters, furious over CNN's recent reporting that stated the strikes on Iran only set back its nuclear program by a couple of months. Clearly, Trump is God. What he says goes. And the United States is the most technologically advanced country that gets everything right, never manages a mistake. Cenk, we're going to throw to you in a second, but first, let's get more details. What Jesse Waters had to say about the strike, because the level of delulu, I'll say, is insane for this one.
Oh, Jesse, it almost seems like CNN and the New York Times are using this leaked report, whatever it is, to cheer triumphantly that perhaps the bunker buster bomber strike wasn't quite as effective as the administration is claiming. What do you make of that? And will the president get credit if he did, in fact, dismantle Iran's nuclear program?
Of course. If there's one thing America can make, it's a bomb. If this didn't work and it was a dud, Netanyahu would have been on the phone with Trump saying, let's do another run. If it didn't work, the Iranians wouldn't have had a ceasefire. This was such a precise strike. They put these bombs down the mountain's ventilation shaft. Okay, this didn't have to explode and bore into the mountain. They put these things untouched and it slid down the ventilation shaft and exploded in the main hall, and then collapsed the roof of the cavern and caused a fire. You could even see the discoloration at the top of the mountain. This wasn't like carpet bombing the North Vietnamese jungles. This was as precise a strike as you can get.
Cenk, I guess I don't understand why this was so important to the administration and the man who leads it, President Trump. I mean, if they set him back a couple of months, wouldn't that be a success? Then get a ceasefire? I just don't understand why Jesse Waters has to carry the water for the president in this way. A strike is a strike, and things didn't go well. Do we have to debate the level to which they didn't go well?
Well, so there's a hilarious lie in there that we're going to show you in a little bit from Jesse Waters. He actually contradicts himself. I love it. But first, to Sharon's point, one of the things I want to discuss here is, look, I think that was cherry-picked intelligence, and I'm glad that they're not listening to it. So I agree with the result of what Donald Trump and Jesse Waters want, which is let's not bomb Iran anymore. The bombing worked well enough. Let's get out of there, okay? But why do you have to attack CNN and New York Times and threaten to sue them or get the reporters fired? That's not necessary at all. You just say it's cherry-picked intelligence, it's wrong, and you move on. But nope. They always have to take it over the top. They always have to try to get everybody fired and canceled, and no one's allowed to criticize the president. No one's allowed to dispute the president. Do we live in a democracy or don't we? Do you believe in freedom of speech or not? New York Times and CNN say it. So what? Say something back, right? Instead of demanding that no one be allowed to say it. They're hilariously hypocritical on free speech. But let you finish the rest of the story, and then I want to come back to the lie too.
Yeah, hypocritical, somewhat. Well, dictatorship is what comes to mind, evidence of that. So let's get into it. CNN, the New York Times, according to the Times, the report by the Defense Intelligence Agency focused largely on the state of the Fordo plant, country's deeply buried enrichment facility, which produced the near bomb grade fuel. Multiple officials familiar with the intelligence report that spoke to both the Times and CNN said, early findings showed this. The strikes had set back Iran's nuclear program by months. Officials said the strikes sealed off entrances to the facility, but had not led to a collapse, leaving open the possibility that Iran could eventually dig it out. New York Times. CNN's report also stated this. The analysis of the damage to the sites and the impact of the strikes on Iran's nuclear ambitions is ongoing. Could change as more intelligence becomes available, but the early findings are at odds with President Donald Trump's repeated claims that the strikes completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities. But Jesse Waters arguing that this reporting is just enemy propaganda trying to discredit Trump.
The woman is the same reporter who said the laptop was Russian. And now she says our bombs don't work. You'd think she would have been fired for getting hoodwinked by the deep state a couple years ago. But she actually got promoted. She got promoted for being wrong. She got a raise for being wrong. Now she's on CNN getting hoodwinked all over again, because that's the point. She's not there to be right. She's just there to hurt Donald Trump.
All right, so as we reported yesterday, Donald Trump went on a Trump social bender, if you will, stating fake news, CNN is so disgusting and incompetent. And of course, what does Trump do when hit with critical reporting about him? Well, Cenk talked about it. He threatens to sue. This, according to the New York Times, in a letter to the Times, a personal lawyer for the president said the newspaper's article had damaged Mr. Trump's reputation and demanded that the news organization retract and apologize for the piece, which the letter described as false, defamatory, and unpatriotic. So I don't, maybe you can sue for that. CNN also confirmed they received a similar threat. The letter from Trump's lawyer, Alejandro Brito, described the attack on Iran as a, quote, historic and resounding military success that unequivocally eliminated Iran's nuclear capabilities and brought peace to the region, echoing the president's own characterizations of the operation. Mr. Brito asserted that the Times article about the preliminary intelligence assessment, quote, undermined the credibility and integrity of President Trump in the eyes of the public and the professional community. But again, the Times noted the preliminary nature of the report. So they're covered there. The Times, in a response on Thursday, rejected Trump's demands, noting that Trump administration officials had subsequently confirmed the existence of the report issued by the Defense Intelligence Agency and its findings. No retraction is needed. No apology will be forthcoming. We told the truth to the best of our ability. We will continue to do so. The Times lawyer pushing back. And look, let's hope that they continue to push back, Cenk and Waz. But I don't know. It seems that the more of this frivolous nonsense, this babbling from the administration, legal fictitious renderings go out, more and more news organizations could cave. Not necessarily the newspapers, Cenk, but we've seen it with multiple networks caving and giving ridiculous settlements. What do you think happens here?
Yeah, unfortunately, as predicted, now other politicians are doing it, like Gavin Newsom. I want to get back to that too, but I want to let Waz weigh in first. What do you think, Waz?
I think the Trump regime only knows one gear, and that's the maximalist response to any and all opposition. However, as wrongheaded as I think this like litigious aspect of their response is, I think they're responding to something real, which is that these deep state people, these warmongering neocon people, they're leaking these reports because they want to go back in. It's just the truth. Like, when are they ever leaking reports like, oh, the military didn't really do a good enough job? That's not a thing. That's not something you're gonna get 3 days after something happened. They're doing it because it's like, no, we need to escalate even further. And I think the Trump administration, to their credit, rightfully understand that an escalation would inevitably lead to all-out war. Iran's response by hitting our bases, telling us ahead of time to do as little impact as possible, even though we're told constantly that the Iranians are part of a death cult who want to just kill everybody. And so it was able to give Trump and them a win to be like, all right, we did it, we're wiping our hands, we're done. They're leaking this in the New York Times and say, no, we need to go do more, which is then going to mean what? The Iranians didn't have to react in kind. And then when they do actually strike us for real, hit our military personnel, not the freaking Israelis, our military personnel in the region, then we have to escalate even further. And that escalation leads to this, and then inevitably means boots on the ground in freaking Iran. That's why they're doing this in the New York Times and in CNN. And yes, Trump's response is ridiculous because he doesn't know any other gears. He doesn't know how to modulate. But I think their instinct here is the right one. The reason why they're criticizing a military action. Think about that. When do the Times or CNN criticize military actions abroad? Never. They're only doing it because they want to do more. And so, like, as nasty and stupid as the responses from the Trump people, I think they have a point here.
Yeah, so I totally agree with Waz, but they could have just said it like Waz. And like we said yesterday on the show with, look, there's evidence, you could create evidence on both sides, and in fact, our intelligence should create evidence on both sides. Hey, here's a report saying that we think we might have done enough damage. Here's a report saying we think we might not have done enough damage. We're not sure, and that's why we have these two different reports. But you don't see both reports. One of them gets picked up by someone who wants to create more war, leaked to the New York Times and CNN. And New York Times and CNN don't give you any context into, oh, this is a warmonger giving me this leak to create more war. They just say it like, oh, that's it, it's definitive, right? And to be fair to the New York Times, they didn't say that it was definitive, but it leaves that impression. And they're great at leaving that impression about how we need to go to more war. Just look at what they did during the Iraq war. Having said that, there's no reason to say that the New York Times is unpatriotic. Reporters don't have to be patriotic. They just have to be accurate, right? There's no need to say that our own intelligence, even if it's cherry picked, is enemy propaganda or reports about it. So yeah, the fact that they can't modulate discredits them, and it's problematic, especially in a situation like this where they're generally speaking largely right about not escalating the war and not using cherry-picked intelligence to escalate it. Last thing, two things I want to get to is the stuff I promised you guys. So now Gavin Newsom is suing Fox News for some edit they did, and Jesse Waters said something about a call between him and Trump. Honestly, the rest of the story is totally uninteresting. He's doing it for media attention, but he's also doing it a little bit like Trump to intimidate the press. You better not write anything or say anything negative about me. So this is another giant problem with how Trump goes about this. Because when you start having politicians threatening to sue anyone who criticizes them, as we told you when Trump first started doing it, now all politicians will say, oh, that's it, you can't criticize me at all, I'm suing everyone. And that's a giant problem. And finally, we get to the funny part. So Donald Trump was very clear. He said the intelligence was very inconclusive. The intelligence says we don't know, which is what I told you a minute ago. Now, Jesse Waters partly agrees, but then partly tells us he knows exactly what happened. Let's watch.
Do you think they're getting it from some sort of nefarious Iranian sources and it's wishful thinking?
Some hater in the Pentagon leaked an early report that had no confidence and just relied on some camera up in the sky. That's it. It's not like there's some Israeli spy down there in the rubble with a phone. Yep, we killed this thing. Can you guys send some food? You're never gonna know what happened because the thing is a pile of rubble. This was such a precise strike. They put these bombs down the mountain's ventilation shaft. They put these things untouched and it slid down the ventilation shaft and exploded in the main hall. And then collapsed the roof of the cavern and caused a fire. You could even see the discoloration at the top of the mountain. They compared the target to something the size of a refrigerator. This was as precise a strike as you can get.
Isn't that amazing? That was in the same segment. He said, there's no way of knowing what happened with the bomb. Let me tell you exactly what happened with the bomb. It slid down the tunnel shaft, and it got there, past Mohammed, and then saw a sandwich that was left by. It turns out it was a falafel sandwich. But there's no way of knowing what happened. But then, come on, Jesse, come on. I mean, if you're gonna lie, at least give it a little bit of space between the two lies. So this terrible story with an amusing ending.
If he's that good though, he's got to get off the air at Fox News immediately and join the CIA. They need him in the intelligence community. If he knows it went down that ventilation chute and all of that stuff, it's incredible. Okay, he's either a genius or a fascinating storyteller. Okay, either way, he's the best. He's the best.
And by the way, they dropped it from 13,000 feet, but it didn't explode. It slid down the tunnel shaft and then exploded later. Likely story. Yeah.
He's the award.
Jesus, man. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.